So if you train literally any martial art, you're gonna get sore. It's just part of the deal if you want to turn yourself into a human weapon. And for the most part, if you get a good night's sleep, that's 80 to 90% of your recovery right there in my opinion. But there's some great recovery techniques I've learned from my years as an athlete that didn't make sense to me at first. For one, I actually found out one of the best ways to heal from exercise is more exercise. And that's tip number one, which is active recovery. So when your muscles are sore, it means that they're torn and need to be healed. So getting blood flow into the injured area helps a lot, which is what happens when you do more exercise. Like I said, it seems like it wouldn't make sense healing yourself from too much training with more training. But my coach explained it's just like filtering out the old pool with fresh water, instead of just letting the old dirty water just sit there, which is what most people do. Now, when you do active recovery, you want to do something that's only the concentric movement. And the concentric movement just means this, like when you do a bicep curl, when you curl it up, that's the concentric movement, and when you lower it down, that's the eccentric movement. When you do active recovery, you want to avoid the eccentric part of the movement because that's mainly the thing that gets you sore. So there's a few things you could do that's only the concentric part of the movement. One thing I really like is sled workouts. There's a bunch of different exercises you could do with that. And I actually made a DIY sled with a tire. I highly recommend doing that. I'll link a video below if you want to learn how to. You can also just go for a walk or a light jog. But my absolute favorite thing to do is a pool workout. Because since you're always pushing against the water, you're always doing the concentric part and never the eccentric. Allegedly, the Russians were the first people to do this. I don't know if that's true, but it seems like it would be. But there's literally thousands of different exercises you could do. George St. Pierre is always doing them on his Instagram. And I'll also link a Bassrootin pool workout that you could do. And of course, if you know how to swim, you could just swim a few laps and call it a day. The third thing is just a proper diet. In one of Elliot Hulse's old videos, he asked what's better for athletes to eat, a salad or a McDonald's burger. And I watched this when I first started lifting, so I was like, that's obvious. A salad would be better. But he actually explained that even though the burger has a bunch of different stuff in it that will give you cancer, it still has things your body needs like protein, carbs, and sodium, whereas the salad doesn't. And I think a beginner mistake when it comes to lifting and fitness is trying to eat too clean and in turn not giving your body the nutrients it needs. So I'm not saying to pound a bunch of fast food burgers that has a bunch of shit ingredients in it that's going to incinerate your testosterone. But I'm saying if you've been working out hard for a while and you're super sore, instead of something like a chicken breast and some lentils, maybe have a nice steak with some good potatoes and some grilled vegetables, since that would just be a lot more nutrient dense and give your body more fuel. If you want to learn why I think red meat is better for athletes than chicken, check out my video on 7 foods athletes must eat. Again, I'll link that below. Now, fourth thing is ice baths, but there's a catch. First of all, there's some debate on how effective ice baths actually are, but just from personal experience, I think they're super effective and they've helped me out a lot. But some people say it could reduce muscle growth if you do it right after a workout. I'm gonna try my best to explain this, but when you work out, your muscles obviously get inflamed, and the inflammation causes your body to rebuild your muscles stronger. The nerds call this muscle protein synthesis. And ice baths reduce the inflammation, but then it also reduces the muscle protein synthesis. Now, I still love ice baths and other cold exposure techniques. When I was playing football in college, we would just go into my unheated apartment pool during the winter and use that as an ice bath. But I would do it the day after practice, or I would do it after practice where it was more about skill learning, and there was another practice the next day. Since I care more about just learning the skill and not being sore for the next day than the actual physical adaptation of my body. Now, the last thing is just lightening up the load if you're super sore. So if you're lifting weights and you usually do 4 sets per exercise, if you're super sore and your central nervous system is fried, I would say just bump it down to 3, or if you're super sore, just bump it down to 2. It's the same concept in martial arts. If you're super sore, there's no point in going to sparring and just getting beat up because you could barely move. There's a quote that's super true, and it's you can't learn how to swim while you're drowning. But definitely still show up for the drilling that happens before the sparring session. It's the same thing with BJJ. You don't need to roll if you're super sore and you feel like you might get hurt, but still show up to drilling beforehand. So I hope you try some of these things out the next time you have a hard workout. And I hope you got something out of this video. But like I said at the start, the number one thing you could do for recovery is get proper sleep. And that's really a non-negotiable if you want to recover. I have 2 videos on how to get proper sleep that I'll put in the description below. And these are things that personally worked very well for me. But if you find these kinds of videos helpful, make sure to subscribe. And make sure to check out my most recent video on training methods Formula 1 drivers do that I think will help martial artists out a ton. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.